this time in history is better than any other time in history to want to be an entrepreneur. You can learn about any industry you want to learn about. Even if you talk about schooling, people say, "Oh, I don't have the right schooling." I mean, you don't need schooling. You could go online and download courses from MIT for free. You could do the same thing with other universities, and other than that, you could just research and study any business you really would want to study.
Hey everybody, this is Devin Miller. Welcome to another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, patent and trademark attorney at Miller IP Law that loves to help startups and small businesses as well as being a serial entrepreneur. Today we have on another great guest, David Borish. He'll do a much better job of introducing himself than I ever could, so I'll let him introduce himself. But he should be a great guest, and we're excited to have you on. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Yes, thank you, Devin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure. So tell everybody a little bit about your journey, about your story of what you're up to, where you're at, and what's going on.
Sure. So I guess I'll start, as early as I can remember being an entrepreneur. If you hear stories of, kids selling baseball cards in school, elementary school, and I was definitely that kid.
So did you really sell baseball cards during school then?
I actually did. Not only did I sell the baseball cards, but at 12 years old, my grandmother tells this story all the time. At 12 years old, she used to drive me to baseball card conventions.
Really?
And we'd load up her car, and this was in Queens, New York. Load up her car. She'd drop me off at 8 o'clock in the morning, pick me up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd have a stack of money from the cards that I sold from the day. And she just was, she's always talked about it for years of this 12-year-old kid was making more money than the parents were at the time.
Hey, that's not a bad one. Now you just have to. I always joke whenever my kids go out to like Halloween or get some like Easter then they have lots of candy. I always tell them they have to pay dad tax, which is give me a piece of candy. So now your parents should have applied the same concept of now they're taxing you in order to be part of the household. But they were apparently a much kinder parents than I am. So that's funny.
There you go. Yeah, for sure.
I read a book. I can't remember if it was Mark Cuban or it was one of them that did a lot of the same thing. And they would go to the card trading. They would just go with like a tiny bit of money. They would buy the cards and sell them at the same show, and then they wouldn't even have to come with the cards. They just
that was another hustle. Yeah, I had a bunch of those same hustles back then. Yeah, you go to the guy who had the exclusive cards, and if it wasn't you, it was someone else who had the new packs. You buy them out early in the show. Everybody's looking for them, and then you're able to resell them throughout the show. So I did that as well. Same thing.
All right. Well, you're. I don't remember which one. I know I read it in a book. I don't remember which famous person. So you guys you stand in good company. So that's awesome. So you started, and I didn't mean to interrupt. So go ahead and keep telling your story.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I always love talking about those times because it shows the early starts of being an entrepreneur, and everybody has those similar types of stories. Especially people that have been entrepreneurs their whole life. So I won't bore you with every business up until my early 20s, where I was when eBay was first becoming mainstream. I used to go and buy like collectibles and things from garage sales and resell them, and then I got into buying wholesale. And then on the West Coast, they started opening up these stores called eBay drop-off stores. And there wasn't really any in New York. And I was living in upstate New York with my then girlfriend, now wife at the time, because she was attending college, and opened up a store. First store, it did extremely well right early on. It was just the right time, right place. And we ended up doing a number of stores and then franchising that. And so it gave me the first retail, real business experience in my early 20s. from there, we then for a number of years helped other businesses franchise. So we used to partner with lawyers and other people in the ecosystem and find concepts and help them franchise. And then in 2008, we had the downturn. You know, nobody was lending money, nobody was making money, nobody was lending money or moving money around. And so I came up with a concept of aggregating multiple securities loans, meaning having multiple customers. And these were actually just started out being, my own clients that needed help. And we pitched a number of banks, including Wachovia, which is, now Wells Fargo, under Wells Fargo. But we told them, listen, we know you give higher net worth individuals better loan terms and rates. What if we would aggregate, let's say $1 million loans? Would you give us the $5 million, high net worth loan? And of course, at the time, they're like, well, bring 5 customers over, sure. And we quickly, took that model around to every single brokerage and bank that would listen, and almost all of them signed on. And what ended up happening was we figured out that the model we created was more along the lines of what mortgage brokers do, but for the loan industry, for the securities loan industry, where you go to a mortgage broker and they have a number of different loans and they sort of figure out the best loan for the customer. We pioneered that in the securities lending industry. And so we eventually became the first, what we call the securities-based loan origination company, built the company up. We had loan brokers around the country. And then we were acquired by Rockwood Capital Group a couple of years later. So that was sort of my first, larger company venture exit. I would say.
Oh, go ahead.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, I was going to. So that's interesting. So, because I could almost see the banks going one of two ways. One, they could say is, I'd rather have a higher net worth individual that has $5 million because he's more likely to pay on it. Or you could do the opposite of saying, hey, $1 million, still a high net worth individual. I'd rather spread it over 5 people because more likely most of them are going to pay or they're not going to default. So which way did the banks view? Did they say, hey, we'd rather have the really rich people that will be able to secure it, or would they rather diversify?
Well, you got to think about at the time, nobody was moving money around. So if you went to call up, let's say you were in JP Morgan and you went to call up Wells Fargo, Wells Fargo would say, are you a customer? And they'd say, no. Well, move your money over, and then we'll tell you about our loan product. And so we sort of had an insight to that. We knew all the loan products. We knew what we can get, what stocks they liked, what they didn't like. And so we used that like a proprietary model to our advantage. But from the bank's perspective, they were just happy to get a new client. They didn't really, they didn't really care or think about the loan. I mean, obviously, these were asset-based loans, so it's not like it was a high-risk loan to the bank.
Okay.
So to them, it was like, well, if they don't pay, we just, take their securities and
it was secured either way.
Yeah, it was secured. It was secured. So, so it from that venture, I was always into tech and had a couple of side ventures in tech. Nothing that really ever took off, in between that time. But from there, I started looking at a number of different tech investments and ventures that I wanted to start, and we ended up starting the first. If you think of like when you go to create a business plan, there's like a Business Plan Pro, and they take you step by step. We created that software called Business Plan Wiz, BP Wiz, for the publishing industry, and it was funny how the idea happened. I was at a conference learning about books, and all they kept saying was, your business plan, your book proposal is your business plan. And I went up to the guy at the end and said, do you have an idea of a software I can use to write the book proposal when I'm ready? Like, no, but that's a great idea. And of course, I couldn't go to sleep that night, and I was on the computer like, this has to exist, and it didn't, and we ended up creating it. So so that was a venture. It was around for a while. We ended up exiting, not a huge exit, but they carried the site on for quite a bit. Actually, just recently, I think shut it down. But they had it for quite some time. So from there, was involved in a couple of other ventures on the tech side, one in crowdfunding. And then I was on the train in New York. This was, around 2012, and it's right around the time when Beats headphones were sort of gaining popularity.
Hmm.
And people were wearing these $300 red headphones. And if you're anyone that knows about sound, would know, for the same quality, you can buy a $120 pair of Sonys. And so that was just boggled my mind. And I realized it was mainly because they had the branding power, they had the celebrities and so
Right.
forth.
It's not only that it's the quality, but it's, hey, I've got the cool headphones type of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was a branding play, but my idea was, let's do that for mobile accessories, and we're talking iPhone 4 at the time.
Hmm.
So it was, pretty early on, and we had a couple of cool products, but the idea was we didn't want to just pay a celebrity to endorse it. We wanted to partner, we wanted to co-found or like create brands,
Hmm.
actual companies, and so we went down the line. We ended up getting in front of Nick Cannon and Snoop Dogg, and the closest deal we had was with Nick Cannon prior to what we launched, and we just didn't give up. And eventually, we signed a deal with Jonathan Chevin, who's now best known as the Food God. He's like the Kardashians and Kanye West. He's tied in with that show and with them.
Okay. So we
And
have to stop there because you dropped enough big names. So how did you got the idea, okay, we're going to get into the mobile, mobile tech or the mobile accessories. We're just going to go find people that would partner with us, whether it's a Nick Cannon or whoever it might be, big enough names, or go to Fubu or go to whoever. How do you start to even approach them? So I'd say most people, at least, maybe you don't, you grew up and knew all these people, but for me, I would have no idea even how to go out and start to reach out to them or find them. So how did you start to make those connections?
I wish I had a secret sauce, but the reality was I was pitching the idea to investors, and I ended up getting an investor who later became my partner and good friend to this day. And without me expressing my full idea, he repeated to me, "I think you're onto something. We should get celebrities involved." And so again, I think it's about having the passion and drive of wanting to do something, and
Hmm.
then just being able to, get in front of enough people to help you execute that idea. So I, he ended up having the relationships. One of the companies he was partners in worked with celebrities. They ended up knowing a number of celebrities and people in the agency business. So that's how we got in front of a lot of them. And then Damon John was one of the first celebrities we pitched. And, Damon's also from Queens, as I am, born and raised. So we had a little bit of connection there. But we pitched him. He said, well, I like the idea, but I'm going to pass for now. Let's, basically come back and let me know how it goes.
Hmm.
But what happened was, in the meantime, we did get that brand started with Jonathan Chevin. Jonathan was being managed by one of Damon's companies, and they saw that we scaled this brand really quickly. We got it on major, we got a lot of press on it, what we were doing, and the Kardashians took pictures and everything. It was just, we did a lot in a little bit of time, and then Damon was impressed by that and came back to us and said, look, you proved out what you're
Hmm.
capable of. So I got some ideas on a brand I want to create, and let's move it forward. So we ended up partnering with Damon John from Shark Tank, and that took us on a 4-year journey of doing some really cool stuff. We ended up getting involved in not only with mobile accessories, but like virtual reality was really new at the time. We
Hmm.
had the first virtual reality headset ever sold on television on Home Shopping Network. Damon went on air, and
Hmm.
what's funny about that story is we had to first of all, we had to explain to them what it was, Home Shopping Network, because they had never seen or heard of a virtual reality headset. And there was only one where you put the phone in and you could look around, but it was still very new at the time. It was the first time anybody had seen it. And they eventually, got on board with us and put it on air. We sold it out really quickly. And I don't like to always say highlights, so I got to be honest about that story. What happened was we sold out in 15 minutes, and our customer service experience following that, the sale of those 15,000 units was a nightmare. And the reason is those 15,000 units were sold mainly to older people who didn't realize you needed a smartphone. And most of our calls came in as like, can I use a flip phone? And well, I don't have a smartphone. I got to return it. So, we were home shopping. It was a success for them in terms of selling, but they begged us to come back on. We went on with other products, but not with that one. So we have the claim to fame of the first virtual reality headset ever sold on television, but probably the most returns ever on a home shopping network as well.
So it's kind of, you got both of them. You got the best and the worst. So that's
exactly,
funny.
yeah.
I wouldn't have even thought of that, but that's a good point. If you take it a little bit for granted, but especially if you're talking to any bit of an older audience or ones that still that time are using flip phones or anything, it's going to be, well, no, this doesn't come, and they're like, that is funny.
Or what? Another thing was they thought it came with the phone. They thought a phone came with it. I'm like, for $50, you really think we're going to send a smartphone and a VR?
I'll just go buy that to get a new phone.
Exactly. Yeah. So
So diving into that, and I want to get into a little bit more of what you're doing now, because it's relevant with COVID-19 and some of the diagnosis and that. But jumping into that, how did you? So you have you go on QVC, you go on Home Shopping Network, you go on make all these sales, and you sell to what would have been older audiences, or at least audiences that didn't understand it came with the phone or they needed it, and then you have all of a sudden a huge customer service problem. How did you deal with that problem, or how did you correct it, or did you correct it, or what was it, because that would be, if I was saying all of a sudden I'm saying, yeah, we got all these sales, it's going to be great. And then the next day I turn around and everybody wants to return it or get mad at me. It's kind of the highest of the high and then right down to the lowest of the low. So how was that?
Well, since we were the first, there was no market, so we were creating a market. So we had a really high margin on the product. So even with the sales, we were still profitable. So it wasn't really, with the returns, it wasn't really that bad in terms of that. We did have a high number of returns, but the margins were really high, so we were profitable at the end. But yeah, every business I've been involved in throughout my career, anyone that'll tell you they start something and it goes exactly as planned from the beginning, they're just lying. There's no, that's not real. That's not the way it works. It's not reality of any business. You're always going to hit the wall and have to figure out something new, a new way to do something, a new way to sell something, a new way to pivot the entire business, the entire model. To this day, I'll bring it into the next business venture from the mobiles and the brands of mobile accessories. We decided after the market became saturated and all mobile accessories ended up becoming commodities, meaning you'll appreciate this being from the Patent and Trademark Office. iPhone would come out in September. You wouldn't know the specs until they announced it in September. To this day, they still do it this way. And then they would ship in October. So you had 1 month. So there was no way to create any real proprietary IP around any of the phones. And this happens every year because iPhone and Android, everybody comes out with a new phone every year. So
even if you could get IP on it, it's like you don't even by the time you'd be able to even get the patent through the patent office, they're already on to the next product, and so you're never going to have a long enough cycle.
I could tell you we had people pitch us products all the time, like patents, but they would pitch us an iPhone phone patent when iPhone 6 was out. So it was like,
some markets it doesn't line up. Does not make sense to go for patent. Some of them, and I'll be an evangelist and I'm biased, makes great sense. But you're right, absolutely right. And I almost look at that as kind of like the Snuggie. Like Snuggie was an awesome one. It took out and they made a lot of money off of it. And yet it was kind of a flash in the pan. You went out for a couple of years, everybody bought them, and then Snuggie went away. So were patents really valuable in that? No, not really. Brand was a great one. But if you're going for patents, it would not have made sense. I'm sure that's a lot the same with the iPhone or the phone accessory market.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a tough decision. We were either going to raise a lot of money to compete with the public companies who were dominating the space with the commoditized business, or we were going to, just shut the brand. So we had a great run. We did a lot of amazing things and decided to move on. So from the experience with VR, I was really getting into virtual reality and looking at it as like, you know, a futuristic technology. Anytime I showed someone just a VR headset, they were blown away. And so I was looking around what could be created around it. And the next venture, next idea was, how do you control the video in a VR headset?
Hmm.
And so we set out to do that. And what ended up happening was we figured out a technology not only for VR, but for mobile phones as well, and any touchscreen devices. And so for
Hmm.
the last 4 years, Neo 360 is a company that I've been building. And we, and just to go back to my point of hitting a wall and trying new things, we initially thought this touchscreen control technology, which allows you to control video just by swiping and touching the screen,
Hmm.
we were going to integrate with apps, and all the apps were going to love us. And we were on development plans for HBO, Showtime, all these big networks that never came to fruition for one reason or another. And we ended up having to pivot 18 months later to go to broadcast, where we finally hit you know, a stride where we you know, able to license to NFL and a couple of other leagues and teams along the way. But you know, you just never know. Now with 5G coming out, the mobile product actually is more viable because you could do longer live video and longer form video with using our technology. So if we would have called it quits after the first run, we wouldn't have saw the second one. And then the second model we're building is kind of a slow model because it's broadcast, and it's not like there's millions of broadcasters. You know, there's thousands, so it's a slow
Hmm.
business. But we hung on there, and now 5G comes along, and now we could go back and have a much bigger play. So, you know, one of the things that I did uh, well there, we did well, was we didn't raise too much money too early. And
Hmm.
the reason is, if we did, we would have had to be forced to scale, to grow. And imagine growing and scaling, and then this what just happened with COVID-19 and
Hmm.
the sports industry, right? I mean, we probably would have had to fold, but because we don't have that pressure, we're, you know, we're able to ride the storm and you know, get through this. So just a couple of quick lessons, you know, along the way. But we so
I'm
so
gonna
yeah,
hit.
Neo 360. Go ahead.
I'm going to hit on because I think that's a good point, and because oftentimes you're always too often, and sometimes it makes sense, but a lot of starts saying, "Hey, I'm going to take in as much money or get as big investment dollars as I can," without ever thinking through what are the kind of the handcuffs that come along with that. And there are a few, and you hit on one. Another one that I see all the time is, "Hey, if we go in and get a huge evaluation, lots of money, it's hard to do another round of that. So you have to keep growing the business bigger and bigger and bigger." Each time. So
Yeah.
if I go in and I get my evaluation, my company's worth 100 million. Well, I don't want to have a down round where you now take a lower valuation because investors don't like that. They want to see their company be more valuable. So now you have to make it worth 2 million or 200 million and 500 million and then a billion. And if you're not ready to scale, or you don't have the plan to scale, or you're still working things out, you can have a whole bunch of money and yet it can be harmful to the company because you took so much money in earlier.
Absolutely, yeah. And by the way, we could have taken money early, more, and we decided not to. It was, you know, in hindsight, a good decision, especially that we didn't have product market fit, and you know, it was still some time till we did. So, yeah. So Neo 360, you know, your audience can go to 360neo.com and check out what we're doing there.
Hmm.
And then sometime last year, you know, I started thinking, you know, I wanted to be involved in something a little more, you know, meaning behind it. And so I was looking at a couple of different opportunities. Wasn't looking to create a new company myself, since I'm, you know, still active with Neo 360. But I did have some time that we're sort of licensing the model now, and you know, gave me a little bit of time to work on it. So work on something else, put some time into something else. So a friend of mine had created a company out of Stanford University. They were
Hmm.
doing breath diagnostics for cancer, and I went and visited them last year in San Francisco, and loved what they were doing. And so we started talking. This was, you know, late last year. They, you know, wanted me to come on board as a strategy advisor. So I took took on that role. And from the point that that happened to now, our whole world turned upside down, as everybody listening knows. So the team has been working for the last 2 years on this breath-based diagnostics. They've identified biomarkers in breath that could determine different cancers. And they also, further future studies are going to be done with neurological diseases and also infectious diseases. So when this happened, one of the co-founders is one of the major hospitalists at Stanford. He was on the front lines of this whole COVID-19. And one of the major problems he recognized was that patients would come in and just based on oxygen levels and x-rays, it was still hard to determine how far or how much lung damage the patient had. And therefore, they didn't know whether to keep them or let them go. And there's a lot of mistakes were made, not necessarily by our team, but around the world, because doctors just didn't have that right, enough information to know how severe. Like, for example, if you have a 23-year-old who seems like they're very sick, and you have a 73-year-old who seems like they're okay, but they have the same oxygen levels and the same X-rays look the same. What do you do, right? Is it the 23-year-old who I have one breathing machine left? Who do I put on? So these decisions were these tough decisions were made, day in and day out at these hospitals. So the team went back and remembered some of the research they were doing, and there was a amino acid biomarker that they looked into, and they quickly realized that this biomarker in breath could help determine how much cell damage the lungs had. So just so you and the audience understand, what happens with COVID-19 is it attacks the lungs and the cells die. And if your immune system is not strong and your stem cell system, is not reproducing, then the cells die and it gets filled with collagen. So collagen, think of it as like cement. So now you got these holes in your lungs and you got little cement pieces. The more cement is in your lungs, the less you can breathe, and eventually you get pneumonia and you die. So it's a major breakthrough to be able to figure out which one of those cells, how much damage there is to the lungs. Therefore, who to keep, who to let go, and how long to keep them, right? Because that's another problem. The hospital keeps somebody on a breathing machine for 10 days when they only needed to be there for 5, but they didn't know, right? They're just basing it on just oxygen levels. So they had this major breakthrough, and so we've been all in on helping the company get this out there and get these studies fast-tracked and get this product to the market in the hands of the physicians as soon as possible. So we just launched a crowdfunding campaign on fundable.com. The company is called Diagnose Early, so you can just Google Fundable, and we're in one of the columns that's new and noteworthy, but you can also just Google Diagnose Early. We're going to have that on the website as well, diagnoseearly.com. And anybody can see the information. If you're an accredited investor, you can actually request to get all the investment docs and the further investment information. And we're giving the opportunity for outside investors to come in and take part in this groundbreaking technology that our team produced, so we can get this to market as soon as possible.
All right, and I definitely will share that with our audience, or the angel investors or venture capital or others that are looking to partner up. Certainly a needed field, as well as something that sounds pretty exciting and promising. So that's awesome. So we're hitting up towards the end of the episode, and every episode, and I say the same thing basically every episode. So I guess I could just stop saying it. There's always so many more things than I want to talk about and dive into in details that we never get. One or two questions. One before, I always have my last two questions, but I'll ask you one more question before my last two questions. And so we have the definition of a serial entrepreneur, right? You went from eBay drop stores to franchising to bundling loans to helping book proposals to mobile phone and doing all that industry to or mobile phone accessories. You're doing, touch screen and all of that now with the NFL, and now you're into COVID. So it seems like, one is you're all over, which isn't a bad thing. You sound very successful, but you're kind of weaving in and out of all these different industries and that. So how do you pick or decide where your next venture is, or what you're going to do and where you're going to put your passion and time and effort on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I like to answer that question first by saying, it does seem like it's all over. But yeah, I just want everyone to understand these ventures were all super focused, right? Like 2 to 3 years, sometimes more, where that's all I'm focused on. So although the industries are multiple different industries, I get satisfaction on going into an industry that I don't have any preconceived idea about, or maybe learn anything prior to what I want to learn or how I want to dive in. And what I do is I like to take things that I've learned from one industry and bring them to another, right? So I've done this multiple times. We didn't talk about some patents that I own, but I've taken the idea of aggregating loans and put that into a voice technology patent that I'm part of. And I've done, I've taken the concepts that I've learned and built, and I've brought them into different industries. So, for example, with medical, like what I did now, I have the crowdfunding background. The team I joined with Strategy, they had no idea about crowdfunding. They had no idea what it was. They didn't even see it as an opportunity. Then I came in and helped them realize that not only is it an opportunity, but we, in this time of quarantine, when you can't get out and meet investors the way you could, it's actually one of the best ways to do it, right? Because you can get in front of as many people as possible without having to go face to face, and you could still navigate the capital raising. So it's just my personality is I like to dive into something new and fresh and learn as if I'm learning from the ground up, and then to add my sort of knowledge and twist to what I'm doing and try to bring something innovative to whatever it is that I'm working on.
No, that's a good point. And so take the skill sets, the knowledge that you have, and applying it to new and interesting something, an industry that you find or a project you find to be exciting or fun or new, and then and apply that as a great way to choose where the next path takes you. So
exactly, yeah.
Now we're hitting to the end of the podcast. I am going to ask my last two questions I always ask at the end of the podcast. So one is, what is the worst business decision you've made?
So yeah, I made a lot of bad business decisions. I think the worst one is taking on the wrong partners for the wrong reason. Sometimes I think before you take on a partner, you really need to get to know them, know their skill set, and know what they're willing to put in. Because a lot of times, if you don't do that, you end up putting in a different level of work, effort, skill. You give up more, than a partner. So it's always good to make sure that's really clear from the beginning. And I've been lucky and did that successfully a few times, and a few times I didn't. So it's hard to have a team when it's not all in by everyone, right? Because you sort of feel. So I would say that's definitely has to be up there with the decisions.
Okay. So that's the one question. Worst decision is bringing on bad partners. And I always flip the question and say, now, if you're getting someone that was a serial entrepreneur or wants to be a serial entrepreneur and hasn't quite broken into the industry or anything yet, what would be the one piece of advice that you'd give someone that was wanting to start on their entrepreneur journey or jump into a new startup?
Stop making excuses. So we live in a time now where, let me just give you the, juxtapose these two times. If you wanted to start a business in 1980, right, and you went ahead, 40 years ago, and you said, I want to start a business. Do you know how much harder it would have been to start a business in 1980? How little marketing you had, maybe the Yellow Pages if you were lucky, some local newspapers, to get into, to meet the right people, to get educated, it was so challenging. This time in history is better than any other time in history to want to be an entrepreneur. You can learn about any industry you want to learn about. Even if you talk about schooling, people say, oh, I don't have the right schooling. You don't need schooling. You could go online and download courses from MIT for free. You could do the same thing with other universities. And other than that, you could just research and study any business you really would want to study. It's not, you could start websites really cheaply. Wix.com, $15 a month will give you a really professional website template. You can plug it in with information. You could find products, or if you come up with a product, you have social media channels that you can reach out to family and friends to buy your products. The list goes on. So my advice is, don't stop making excuses. Take the first step. Take one step at a time, right?
Yep.
If you look at how much time we spend on our mobile devices, just going on Instagram and this and that, and wasting time, everybody can go on there and figure out how much time you're actually wasting. I don't know how many people really do it. But if you want, you can do that. Take 20 minutes a day. Save 20 minutes of that time a day, right? And use that 20 minutes towards your goal of starting a business. Doing 20 minutes of research a day, that'll get you in a month. You'll have more information and more, ways to get started than ever. So there's no excuse. I think just stop making excuses and just get started. Just do it.
Well, I like that. I think that's probably what keeps people a lot of times that otherwise I don't have the education, I don't have the money, I don't have the experience, I don't have the background, don't have the connections. Whatever your excuse is, just start doing it. Even if it's you don't know what you're doing, figure it out along the way, but get started, I think is great advice. Well, thank you for coming on. It has been a really fun discussion. It hit on a whole bunch of different topics. Always wish I had more time, but that will wrap it up for today for this episode. So thank you again for coming on. For those of you that are needing or wanting to get your journey started, happy to help any way I can. I do patents and trademarks with Miller IP Law. If you want to reach out to us there, we're happy to help there. If we can connect you up with anybody, we're here to help and connect in any way we can. We're really just here for the startups and small businesses that are wanting to get going. Thank you again, David. Last thing, if people want to you mentioned at the beginning, I'll give you your time and then we'll wrap it up. People want to get or contact with you. They want to reach out to one of your projects, or they want to support your company with doing the COVID diagnosis. Or that, what's the best way to reach out to you?
So David Borish, that's BORISH at David Borish on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I have my website is davidborish.com. So it's really easy to reach out to me. I'm always willing to help with questions. If anyone has any questions or advice they need. Diagnoseearly.com is our website, and we're on Fundable, as I mentioned earlier. And on davidborish.com, you'll find all links to the other ventures and everything mentioned before.
Awesome. Well, I will certainly make sure to direct everybody there and hope everybody comes out and supports you with all the different things you're doing. Thank you again for coming on. It was great to hear your journey, and it was a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Devin. Appreciate it.